But I think it's useful to remind people what apparently Elon Musk's community notes folks at Twitter don't know, what a lot of Republicans don't know, what almost every Democrat doesn't know, which is what the Trump election contest actually presented. And if you read the indictment, you might not know that election contest even existed. Like most Democrats, like many Republicans, like many in the media. And the reason why I'm not in that indictment, the reason why Cleta Mitchell's not in that indictment, the reason why Patrick Witt is not in that indictment, the reason why some others are not in that indictment is because they don't want the world to know about the election contest. So for those that don't know, Trump only brought one election contest anywhere. People say, oh, there's 60 suits that were addressed by the court. None of those were Trump's election contests. Trump only brought one, and he brought it in Georgia. Number two, that election contest was never heard. So, like, community notes got confused with other cases brought by other parties, not by Trump in Georgia. So, the Lynn Wood case was just Lynn Wood. The Sidney Powell case was just Sidney Powell. Other electors brought other electors' challenges. Trump only brought one election contest in Georgia himself.
Let me stop you, just so that people don't accuse me of not asking the question everyone's asking. What were the other 60 lawsuits? The talking point is Trump and team brought over 60 lawsuits. All of them were dismissed. How many of them got to the merits? But what were the other 59 some odd lawsuits?
Well, there are different kinds at different times in different places. So some were pre-election, some were during the election, some were after the election. So it depends on the circumstances. But in all the other cases, it was either electors or local individuals bringing suit, not Trump bringing suit. And so Trump was rarely a party to any of those claims, and those were usually limited procedural claims. There was only two major cases that Trump supported: the election contest in Georgia, and he supported the U.S. Supreme Court case that was brought with all the attorney generals and members of Congress. Those are the only cases that really mattered. The rest were ancillary efforts by ancillary parties to get to the issue. Many of them brought by Sidney Powell, which got nowhere, unsurprisingly. Some brought by others that were aligned in that sector, Lynn Wood, etc. What is true is that the Kraken got nowhere. But what is not true is that Trump's allegations got nowhere. What happened in Georgia law is that when you file an election contest, court has to be assigned, the right court has to be assigned, and within 5 days, set a hearing, and in 10 days, hold that hearing from the moment it's filed. Georgia never did. Georgia didn't schedule it until after January 6th. It was moot by after January 6th, so it was dismissed at that point. That's what happened. And Trump appealed to the Georgia Supreme Court saying, look, Fulton County Superior Court won't do their job under the law. And the Georgia Supreme Court dodged it by saying, well, see if the Court of Appeals would do something first. And the Court of Appeals never did. So, I mean, they just played a game, and they only got away with it because the Court of Public Opinion was distracted by the Kraken and Dominion and all of that red herring stuff. But let's go to what they detailed. The allegations in that complaint, none of which are meaningfully contested in the indictment, yet they pretend that Trump had no basis for his claims about Georgia, include: were there only constitutionally qualified people who voted? Were there only constitutionally qualified ballots that were cast correctly? And were the ballots counted and canvassed in a constitutionally qualified manner? For a presidential election, that's what rules the state legislature sets for who can vote in the presidential election, how they can vote in the presidential election, and then how those ballots are canvassed and counted in a presidential election. What we proved beyond, and so I was there during the early stages of the case. 90% of what's in that election contest came from work that I did, along with Patrick Witt and Cleta Mitchell and a bunch of great others. And in that, so I know it very, very well, over 400 pages of sworn affidavits and testimony in support of that electoral contest. It was backed up by detailed data, documents, and review and study. Anybody who tells you the 2020 election was on the up and up in Georgia has never read that election contest, or they're liars. They're like Mike Pence. They're like Judge Michael Ludig. Frauds. I'll get into Ludig here in a little bit. But the details in there: who were the constitutionally unqualified people to vote? Well, to be constitutionally qualified to vote in Georgia, you needed to be 18 years of age at the time of the election. You needed to be registered at your habitation. It's important. Registered. You need to vote in the same place that you are registered. You need to have not voted or be a resident of any other state, and you need to not be dead. That's it. Unfortunately for the state of Georgia, they couldn't manage that. There were thousands and thousands of people who either were not 18 when they voted, were dead. Over 10,000 were dead when they voted. I mean, again, we had the obituary, not only the sworn testimony, the obituary of the person who died 3 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks before their ballot was sent in. I mean, this was irrefutable evidence. This is why they would never hear it. For all the people out there say, oh, the Secretary of State looked at it and the governor looked at it and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation looked at it and they all said it was fine. Well, if it was all fine, then why were they all so scared to allow that case to go to a trial and a hearing? If it was all so fine, why were they scared to do what they promised to do, which was publish the ballots? If it was all so fine, why were they scared to allow anybody as a third-party observer or a party observer to see the signatures actually matched? Instead, Mark Meadows, for merely requesting that, is now indicted as a criminal, as a felon, as a racketeer, as if he's a mobster. So there are people that were dead who voted. There are people who were under 18 who voted. There are people who voted in other states. There are people who voted who weren't registered within the same county. And my favorite, there are people who said they lived inside of a little post office box who voted, which is illegal in Georgia. You couldn't vote in the presidential election unless that was your home, and you can't live inside a post office box.
Robert, in fairness, I could probably live inside a P.O. box. Now, but the question is this. Where is this evidence for anybody who wants to see it, and why did a judge or, I don't know, someone in the system of justice never see it?
Oh, it's solely because the Fulton County Superior Court refused to assign a hearing to it against the law. And the Georgia Court of Appeals and Georgia Supreme Court refused to enforce that law. That was it. And, I mean, that's all that happened. And then they just ignored it. And they got away with it in the court of public. They got away with it because the court of public opinion was not paying enough attention to that case, because they were all distracted by the red herring of Sidney Powell and the Kraken and Dominion and German servers and Iranian ballots and Chinese paper ballots and Venezuelan software and all that garbage. That's why that red herring was there. It was to make sure you didn't pay attention to that election contest.